What's up, guys? This is Coach Alex Van Houten with Better Daily, and tonight we are talking about ultimate mindsets. And in this workshop, we're following up on a workshop we did about 2 months ago with regard to growth mindsets. This is particularly pertinent to us because we've been doing this for the past 32 days in the Faithful 40 Challenge. That is, recording our mindsets daily, publishing those out, and journaling those to the community, and seeing how that changes what we do about our day. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And tonight we'll talk about some of the science behind that and how to make those even better. So here we go. You can do it, PowerPoint. Hang with me. There it is. All right. So our agenda this evening, we're going to highlight just a few of the mindsets from this challenge to get a feel for what we've been up to. And then we're also going to do an overview of Better Mindset. We're going to talk about mindset and belief and how that fits into the science of health and fitness. And then we're going to dive specifically into growth mindsets and then talk about the possibility of another brain, i.e. our gut, and some of the ways that that might affect our primary brain, or the one in our actual head. And I also intend to talk about journaling and fasting this evening as well, if we have the time to get there. As always, if you're live with us and you have questions, please drop them in the app if you're joining us live on the app, or make sure you write those down. And when I ask for questions here in the Zoom room, you can ask those. So just highlighting some mindsets from the Faithful 40 Challenge. For the last 40 days, we've been journaling our mindset every day. We've been journaling our nutrition from the day before, and we've been talking about the exercise that we intend to do today. And when we did this a year ago, the mindset piece was what most people reported was the most meaningful part of the challenge. And so I've highlighted a few of these here. Jared said, hey, mindset, getting back into my routine after being sick again, but I can work with this. And you'll hear that in some of the mindsets when you fall off the wagon for a bit, or there's a significant obstacle that keeps you from doing what you'd like to do. There's that ethos. And man, this was just a rough Faithful 40 Challenge in terms of being sick. Everybody and their mom, I guess, is wrestling with some sort of respiratory thing or got a stomach bug. It seems like just about each one of my clients wrestled with that. So if you're not one of those, knock on wood or say a special prayer and don't get sick. Baraz said, hey, I'm ready to take on the day. I know I've not been the most faithful here, but I'm going to miss seeing all the check-ins. So as we're coming toward the end of the Faithful 40 Challenge, he's highlighting the fact that this has been meaningful to him, even though he hasn't been faithful in posting. He's been faithful in checking up on how everybody's doing, and that's inspiring to him. Then we've got Pat, who said, our lives have a countdown clock that we can't see. Mine reminds me to do only the work that matters. That's Donald Miller. And that was a cool quote. And that's something that occurs regularly in the Faithful 40 Challenge, is recording quotes, whether it's Bible verses. You can see that's one of my mindsets there from Romans 5. Not only so, we also glory in our suffering, because we know suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. That's one I want on my garage gym wall, because for some reason that just speaks to the heart of the trainer. I only take pleasure in your suffering when I know it's making you better, or at least that's what I tell my clients. It burns, doesn't it? Yes, it's good for you. It helps you get better. And then you'll see a mindset in the top right there, onward and upward despite the obstacles. And then Miss Janet in our group, she likes to post a mindset, and then she also likes to post a quote. So I don't know if she's like doubling up on her mindset. She's like, I'm going to get one of these positive things in my head. But she said, I'm determined to eliminate the distractions that keep me moving forward. And then Miss Patty D says, sometimes our stop doing list needs to be bigger than our to-do list. And that's true. That is a true statement. So as you can see in the Faithful 40 Challenge, people draw from a number of places to get their mindset. There's people in the group who will post songs. So a song will help put them in the right mindset for them, whether it's lyrical or just instrumental. And I think for many of us, we can say that music has a part to play in that. And that's something we'll talk about today as well. So all this talk about mindset, like, mindset can be a really esoteric sounding thing. It's like, I'm going to put my mind on XYZ, and hopefully it changes me. And this is actually a very well studied phenomenon, that the way we think about something can change the way we respond to it, the way we approach it, or even how we ourselves act in light of it. So there's really simple chart here. This is actually taken from a fourth grade like motivational poster, and I'm not treating you like fourth graders here. This is something that if you didn't learn in childhood is extremely important to learn in adulthood. And that's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is one that says, I failed at this thing, but it taught me something, and so I'm going to grow because of it. Whereas a fixed mindset says, when I fail at something, it's because I'm inadequate. I'm never going to be able to do XYZ. So on the left there, you can see things like, instead of thinking I can't do it, you can think I'm still learning, I'll keep trying, right? Or it's too hard would be, with more practice, this could get easier. Or I don't like challenges, which could be translated to something like, challenges make me better, right? So when facing failure and difficulty specifically, it helps to frame things in a powerful light mindset wise. So instead of, I wonder what, or sorry, instead of approaching something and when you don't know what to think about it, it's helpful to say, I wonder what insert a person that you admire would do, right? I don't know if you guys remember those rubber bands that used to say WWJD, what would Jesus do? And if you're of a Christian background, or even if you're not of a Christian background, that is a powerful thought and concept. You walk into a place in your life where you encounter an obstacle or something unsavory, and you say, what would the person I admire do with this situation? And it can really stop you, and it can really change the way you think, and it can really change the way you act, in that. And if you've had the fortune of having a wonderful father or a wonderful mother in your life, or a wonderful grandfather, grandmother, or maybe there's some authors you particularly appreciate, or maybe you're relatively close to your pastor at home, that you can ask that question, and it personifies the mindset well for you. We are, as human beings, we are a platform built on mirror neurons, which means that we can actually take what we understand somebody to be and map that onto our being and embody what they do, and sometimes even what they think. So like if I want to teach my client how to do a good squat, I don't just sit on my butt and say, all right, so you, client, need to grip the ground with your feet, and you need to keep your heels nested firmly on the ground. Keep your lower legs activated. Drop your hips back. I need you to sit down while you keep your head and chest up at the same time. Keep your core engaged and breathe. I don't do that. The first thing I do is say, hey, watch me. And I perform a squat, and I show them some of the things that I'd like them to be thinking about. And then them watching me do a squat, their brain goes, oh, I can do that. And so they go to do their squat. Maybe it doesn't look the same, but what happened in their mind mapped me onto them. And I've been doing a squat for a long time. So if you do a squat poorly and I do a squat well, and I go to show you how to do it, then what happens is you skip a lot of learning curve steps and you learn how to do it correctly. And that's actually how our children learn to speak as well. And so this is a very powerful tool in your mindset toolbox, is to think about, and if you have just a second to close your eyes and picture at least 3 people that you admire. You can just say, I admire this person, I admire this person, I admire this person. If you have a list of those people, or maybe even their pictures around somewhere, and you don't have to be weird and creepy about it unless you don't mind being weird and creepy, but if you can have that person in a place where you see them when you wake up. This is one of the reasons that in Christian circles we talk about starting the day with the Bible, or with words from the Bible, because we can find people we admire and map their mindsets onto our day. Very powerful. Another thing you can do from a growth and fixed mindset perspective is, have I felt this before? How'd it go? Have I grown up since then? It's very important, because one of the reasons we come into a fixed mindset state, like, this is too big for me, I can't handle it, or I failed and I'm a terrible person, or I have no idea how I'm going to deal with this thing. The ability kind of in the same vein, to look back in our history and say, have I been here before? And how'd I get through it? Also, have I grown since then? And those questions can be really helpful with regard to a mindset. My kids were sick recently, and with the first time Gabriel was sick, we were freaking out as parents. We didn't know what to do. They got fevers and they puke, and you're like, I don't know, I have no idea. And you're like, you don't sleep. You just sit up at night thinking about how much they're coughing and whether or not they're getting any sleep. And fast forward to now, just 5 years later, both kids are kind of sick, and you're like, oh, okay, I know how to do this, and give them a little help with their cough and give this one some water. No, we don't have to stay up and listen for them to cough. They will breathe. They will be fine. Like, oh, wow, you threw up on me. Like, that's cool. Like, just wipe that off. I'll change my shirt in a second. It's not a brutal endeavor. It sucks. Don't get me wrong. But I've been here before. It's okay. I can manage this. And the same thing can go in your life, especially with regard to your work, maybe with regard to different relationships, maybe with regard to pain or injuries that you're wrestling with. You can say, I've been here before. I've had worse, like I've had worse. I was not able to walk once upon a time, but I can do X, Y, Z while I'm recovering. So am I willing to give up? Why not? That's, in my mind, that's one of the primary things you can do from a mindset perspective. Is when you're in a cruddy mindset, you can say, all right, well, I have an option. I can literally lay here and do nothing and just give up on this whole betterment thing. But am I willing to do that? Why not? And that's the thing about a growth mindset is your why is bigger than your obstacles that you're facing. What can I do right now that someone I love would be thankful for? That's a wonderful way to change your mindset. If you can shoot somebody a text that would just tell them that you're thinking of them. If you can write a letter, if you can call somebody, if you can perform an act of service or give a gift, you can instantly switch your cruddy, subpar, fixed mindset into something a lot more positive and powerful. That's a scientifically proven fact as well. You can also ask, what am I fighting for? That's a particularly important one to me, because sometimes days feel like a fight, physically, mentally, spiritually. Sometimes days feel like a fight, and it's important to me to remind myself what it is that I'm working so hard for, and what it is that I would do anything for my boys. I would do anything for my wife. I would do a lot of things to make sure that the people who depend on me for their results in my business and to show up well for them, I would do a lot of things to make that happen. And so it's important when your mindset sucks to remind yourself what you're fighting for. And then the last thing I would say here is a swap between the this is happening, so I can't do this. That's an easy place to be. I'm sick, so I can't do this. My kids are sick, so I can't do this. My babysitter plans fell through, so I can't do this. Work was hell all day long, so I can't do this. My knee hurts, so I can't do this. There's a lot of that. So there has to be a switch to flip, and it's easy to do if you say this. Even though this is happening, I can still insert thing you can still do here. And that's really important, because unless you're just immobilized, which is possible, I guess, in life, stranger things have happened, unless you're actually immobilized and there's literally nothing you can do at all. There are a few situations like that. There's no good you can do in a situation sometimes. Grieving can be like that. It's or managing the passing of a family member is like that. There's nothing you can do. But even though blank is happening, I can still blank. I can still fellowship. I can still walk. I can still pray. I can still manage my nutrition well. And that's extremely important. I had a conversation with a lady recently. She's going through an intense bout of depression, and she was like, I'm depressed, so I don't really want to work out. It was like, even though you're depressed, you should still go work out. You can still go do it. It doesn't have to be your best performance. It doesn't have to be crazy, but put your running shoes on. Even though you're depressed, you can still put your running shoes on. Even though you're depressed, you can still walk out on the sidewalk. Even though you're depressed, you can still get some sunlight, and maybe you don't have to jog. Even though you're depressed, you can still listen to some music while you're walking. And then she she texted me about 30 minutes later and was like, so I was already walking out there with music on, so I just did my run anyway. Like, yeah, that's how that works. So but that's a powerful mindset shift as well. So those of you who are live, I've said a lot of things here about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and I want to talk about the science of this in a second. But does anybody have any questions or comments when having wrestled with this over the Faithful 40 challenge that is worth addressing here? How you switch from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, or things that you found have worked well for you? Is anybody going to give my voice a break?
I think just other people in our lives that are speaking into our lives can definitely help. Because, when we get pulled into the fray of work and everything else, it's really easy to get into reactive mode and not be real intentional.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I struggle with, though, is orienting myself toward a more positive mindset. Sometimes you get on there and you think, I'm just so weary. And you're like, come on, you got better than that. You can give better than that. Where do you want your day to go? And you sit down, you give yourself a good talking to, and most of the time you come up with a better mindset. I mean, even if it's something as simple as, I know I'm blessed. But that's my favorite part, though, is making sure I'm orienting my mind that way.
I've noticed in the Faithful 40 challenge too, if you're weary or tired or in pain or something, I mean, even if we're trying to orient well, which I appreciate so much from the group of people that we have, even if we're trying to orient well, there are still those days that are just, I mean, what are you gonna do? and so you throw it down there, and people come alongside you and give you a virtual slap on the butt. It's like, hey man, hang in there, you're not alone, we all have those days. Kind of stinks, sorry. If you need an ear, shoot me a message.
I really appreciate that from the group too.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I think it's important to remember also that all things are finite, right? There's weariness and pain and all that isn't inexhaustible. There's an end to that rope too. So I for some reason I always have kept in mind, it's kind of like that guy at the end of the war right before the armistice, and I just don't want to be the guy that is the last one to go. I'm not going to be the one that gives up just before we get over the parapet, So I figure I've at least got another breath in my lungs. So as long as I got it, I can just keep going. So.
If you're talking to us, Robin, you're muted, brother, so I missed you. But if you're talking to somebody off camera, that's also what you just said, Pat, makes me think of the parable of the lamps. You guys know the parable of the lamps? So Jesus is telling this parable, and the bridesmaids, there's 10 of them, they're waiting on the groom, and they don't know when he's going to be there. So 5 of them are really wise, and they bring extra oil because well, they're prepared. They're going to be, and the other 5 are like, oh no, my lamp burned out, I don't have any oil, can I borrow some of yours? And they're like, no, this is my oil, like I planned for this, you're gonna have to go in the marketplace and find your own oil. So they're out there getting the oil, and the groom comes, and the less prepared bridesmaids get shut out, and the question is, what are you going to be up to, and what's your mindset going to be like? What did you prepare for, given that something important's coming your way? And that's life. Jesus has a way of putting life in a story really, really well. But that's life. Something important's always coming your way. Something that is going to require the best of you. And the question is, how's it going to find you? Where are you putting your best foot forward? And I think for me, this mindset thing, but especially in this stage of my life with little kids and stuff, every single day seems like something monumental is going to happen, because it does. Monumental things happen every day in our world, and sometimes they're great, sometimes they're terrible, but it's like, how did it find me? Did it find me in a stupid, annoying place, or did it find me robust and ready to manage it with whatever gusto I can muster?
Well, I think, and also thanking God in that season. I mean, not to jump into, the spiritual side of it all the time, but I mean, it's kind of like with Job, though he may slay me, still I will praise him. I mean, we're not promised good times all the time. And like you said, it's this struggle. That's what builds perseverance and character and gets us to the other side so that we can be a help to other people. Because if we can't fight, if we've not taken notes and we fought the monster and prepared ourselves well, we'll be no good to anybody else. So when we do it, we've got to do it well and hopefully chalk up some notes and be a help to somebody else. So
does anybody find it's easier to shift your mindset, or at least there's a little more motivation behind it if somebody's depending on you to do it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
this morning we had a reminder also that I had a coworker with family in Rwanda, and they're having to relocate and find a place to live because of the volcanic eruptions. And all of us just said, it was a multi international call, and we just said, wow, we're so tempted to complain and be stressed and things like that through the day. And when you stop and see, people with real issues, they're about to lose home and have to find some place to live and things like that on a moment's notice, it really switches your mindset as to how stressful your life really is, which is not. So.
Yeah. Well said. I almost put that on this slide as, how could this get worse? Because you could, and if you're not in a depressed state of mind, that can be helpful. Kind of compare down, what's the saying? I used to complain about my torn up shoes until I met a guy who had no legs. It's like, I'm happy about my shoes. I can walk. But if you're in a depressed state, then it's easy to catastrophize, because it's not just, and this is just, if anybody watching has been depressed or is right now, I don't want you to hear this mindset stuff is like, you got to pull yourself up from your bootstraps and imagine, at least you're not next to a volcano, so snap out of it. It could be worse, but that's a real possibility. If you've ever been in a depressed place, at least I'm not next to a volcano becomes like, I could be on a volcano, like something like that could happen today. But you're so right, that the nice thing about being human and alive is that it could always get worse, and that's a great source of some good positive mindsets. Thankful despite how bad things are, because it could be worse. there you go. When you want to put weary as mindset, it's just could be worse. could be worse. On a slightly lighter note, the research on this is very interesting. They've done several studies on this, and if you're interested, I put them in the notes that I sent you, the slide notes for the actual workshop. This body of research followed children in this particular study, and what they did with the kiddos is they told them, did you know that they had a control group and then the mindset group, right? In the growth group, they got the good message. It was, did you know that your brain is an amazing organ, that the more you practice with it, the smarter you get and the better you get at things that you practice at. And to the control group, and this is I love science, but this is bordering on child abuse, in my opinion, when it comes to what we know about mindset. I guess they didn't know this particularly because, well, they hadn't done the study yet. But so they told the growth mindset group that, and then they told the control group, intelligence is innate. You're born with it. You either have it or you don't. So if you get a certain score on a test, that just reflects how much intelligence you have. And so that's where we're at with that. So as you can see, like we intuitively understand how a child responds to both sets of information. And what they found is that seventh graders, when they were told this over the course of the school year, that their math GPA went up significantly in the growth mindset group, apparently because knowing that practicing at something makes you better at it was a helpful message. And then for the control group, it actually went downhill. They did a sister study to this about 5 years later, where they told teachers, this was a really interesting study, and it's not shown on the slides here, but they told teachers that they told one control group teacher, hey, we've tested all of these kids and their IQs are above average, and we've filtered them out and we've given you the above average IQ children. So you've got the smartest kids in the school. And then they told other teachers that they, that there was this gifted program, they had filtered some kids out. And so, these were the normal kids, these were the average kids. They didn't actually do any of that. They were randomly assigned. The children were randomly assigned. So any scores on IQ tests and their relative intelligence was completely mute. But by the end of the year, the group of teachers who'd been told that they had the gifted children, their children were performing significantly better than the control group. Even though they hadn't been filtered for IQ, it was that telling the teachers that they had gifted children in their class changed their mindset about how they approached their teaching the children themselves, and probably changed the way that they spoke to the children. Wow, you're so smart. Or, oh my gosh, you're catching on to these things faster than other students I've worked with before. Or, wow, if you keep practicing at it, I know you're a smart kid. You'll figure it out. That sort of encouragement was present in that classroom, whereas the classroom where they were like, oh, there's the gifted class over there, but you have the average kids. They performed significantly less well than those other children, even though they were randomly assigned. And so this mindset thing works both ways. It's not just what we tell ourselves, it's also how we respond to other people and how they respond to us. That's important. So, Better Daily is at its core, it's a group that centers on betterment in mind, body, and spirit. And so the question might be, how does mindset really affect this whole nutrition and exercise thing? And some of you have seen this before, some of you haven't, but it's important to understand that the stresses that happen in our day, and not just like things that are stressful, but stress like exercise, or stress like getting a bad email from your boss, or stress like having to throw your banister out the house at a moment's notice and get 47,000 steps to fix it in the tile and all that. I'm not pointing anybody out here, but specifically that guy had a lot of work to do the last couple of days. That's a stressful event. And the question is, does it matter what we think about the stress we're under? And it turns out it does. The stress that we're under can be the same in two different situations, but how our body responds to that stress, whether or not it builds itself to become stronger and grow from it, or whether or not that stress tears us down over time, has a lot to do with how it filters through our brain. I'm not saying it's all in our brain, but I'm saying that it does have a powerful impact on it. So what you'll see here is that stress, relationships, work, exercise, money, they feed into our belief system. Spirituality and mindfulness can change our belief system over time, and our belief system can determine whether or not this stress is going to grow us or whether or not it's going to damage us. So I've used the example in the past, and I hope it's not a beating a dead horse here, but if a mountain lion's chasing you and you're going for a run because you're running from a mountain lion, that is damaging to the cellular structure. Your body is pulling a lot of resources to survive in the moment. Or a different person on a different day goes for a run because I have some weight I would like to lose. I want to look great for my daughter's wedding. I would like to stave off heart disease, so I'm going for a run. That person's belief system changes the way their body responds to the run versus the belief system of somebody who's running from a mountain lion. In one situation, exercise grows the person. They come back stronger. Their cells become more resilient, even though they're running just like the person running from a mountain lion. It's a different effect on the cells because of the belief system. And this has actually been borne out in research. So in this particular study, they're working to do a replication study and then something in addition to it. So until I have that one in hand, you're going to keep hearing about this one in particular. But in this study, what they did is they took participants and they tested them for endurance genes. There's a few genes that predispose you to be relatively good at endurance events. And so we know what those genes are, and they're found in, Olympic marathoners and stuff. And so they tested these individuals for their genetic heritage, and they found, certain ones of the group that had the endurance genes, but they didn't split them up with the endurance genes. What they did is they randomly assigned them, and they told one group, hey, you have endurance genes. And they told the other group, you don't have endurance genes. And so they tested them on a treadmill before and after telling them that. So they tested them on a treadmill. They, did their run, and they kept increasing the incline and the speed until they gave up. And then they're like, wow, great work. And then they sat them down and told them whether or not they had endurance genes. 6 weeks from then, they tested them again. And what they found is that the folks who they told that they didn't have endurance genes performed worse on the treadmill test. And not only did they perform worse, because you could just tell yourself like, oh, I don't have endurance genes, so I should probably stop this treadmill test anyway. There's no reason to work very hard if I'm already predisposed to suck at this whole thing. But they also did a measure of carbon dioxide buffering in both groups. And what they found is not only did the people who were told they didn't have the genes perform worse, but physiologically their bodies became worse at buffering carbon dioxide. That's weird. And if that doesn't freak you out, then you didn't hear me right, because the way they thought about whether or not they had endurance genes changed how well their body moved a molecule through the body. Like, how does it do that? That's weird. That's very weird. That's freakishly weird, because if you can do it with carbon dioxide, maybe you can do it with other stuff. Maybe there's a mindset around how we digest our food well. And maybe there's like this could get weird enough that it might matter whether or not you pray over your food at dinner. And I'm not saying that it doesn't matter whether or not you pray over your food, but physiologically, it could be possible that we could test some molecule that changes something that happens in us because we are grateful for our food and we express that in front of other people. Now, that's not been studied yet, but I'm telling you that this particular research study gives a foundation for that sort of study, that your mindset changes the way your body works. And you know that even though you don't know that. Like, if you get up in the morning and you're like, I gotta run, I don't really want to run, but I'm gonna run, and you go for your run. Or if you wake up the next in the morning and you go, like, I don't really feel like running, but I'm doing this Faithful 40 challenge thing and I want to be able to post that I did my run, so I'm gonna go for my run. Those can be different runs, and the same thing could be different for a walk or a weight training session, or insert thing here that matters to you that you're trying to motivate yourself to do and have a good mindset about. And that significantly changes things. And I'm curious, I'd like to ask the group, how have you experienced this in your life where you've changed your mindset and felt a very different feeling in a situation that should have felt poorer because of the mindset shift? Or maybe the opposite direction. You had a crappy mindset and it was way worse than it needed to be. Has anybody experienced anything like that, like at the level of the body that you've noticed in yourself?
I can say, like, because I'm very social and extroverted, which I know I'm very shocked, that what I can accomplish in workouts and many other situations, if I have a buddy with me and I'm chatting and having a good time, is night and day. If I go by myself, you know, I'm just like, well, this is boring. if I'm, you know, running with a friend and we're chatting the whole time, before you know it, 4 miles is over and we're, you know, we're on to our day.
Mm.
For me, I've noticed having company, you know, changes my mindset tremendously. You know, so I realized that if that changes my mindset, then I'm capable of changing it in other ways too, you know, so that, you know, I can put myself into a better mindset around, you know, whether work or anything.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. That's so true. I've noticed that with having a buddy. I work out harder with somebody around, and it doesn't feel harder. You just work out harder.
Fun. You're chatting, you're having a good time, and all of a sudden it's over.
Right. Anybody else notice a difference in the way your body feels, or something in different situations because of a mindset? I've experienced this with a race. Has anybody done like a 5K or a 10K or something like that? I always run faster in a race, but it doesn't feel as hard as my training. It's not because the course is particularly helpful or anything. It's just like, wow, I didn't know I was running that fast. And it's because everybody's running. You know, I got to catch that guy, or don't let him pass me. Or
so are you saying that's an element of adrenaline then?
It could be an element of adrenaline. I'm not really sure what adrenaline and epinephrine are a huge hormonal piece of feeling that, like performance tension might be a good way to put it. But just like talking about in this study in particular, this wasn't adrenaline at all. This is carbon dioxide buffering. In fact, you would think that somebody who thinks they don't have the endurance gene would get a little more pump. You know, okay, I don't have the endurance gene, but I gotta run. You know, so it's stressful to me. But that's not what they found in here. I'm not really sure what the chemical composition of that sort of thing is. I've done that with clients. I won't tell them I'm adding weight to their work. So we're like doing 4 sets of leg press or something. And so we start at X weight, and, you know, we get to talking about something, and I'm putting plates on, or I'm changing the thing, and they don't even notice. And then they do their reps, you know, 10 reps before was tough. And then they do 10 reps now, and they go, that felt heavier this time. And I'm like, I mean, that was 50 pounds heavier, actually. But I didn't tell you because I wanted you to take the same mindset from your previous set to this one, rather than, oh no, 50 more pounds. How's this going to go? I just did that with a lady today, actually in Better Daily. I upped her deadlift, and she thought she was doing the same deadlift as she did last week, but it was actually 20 pounds more. And she went to lift it, and she like stood up. She goes, man, this was way harder. And she set it down, and it was her first time ever lifting that much weight. And I was like, oh yeah, it was 115 pounds. Great work. And she's like, I lifted over 100 pounds. That's huge. But the mindset, I've done this before, no big deal. I just have to focus on my form and do a good job. That mindset is important, even with, you know, if the weight's a little bit heavier and you're like, I've never done this much. It messes with your head, changes the way you do your form and all kinds of stuff. But I've seen that happen in training situations as well.
I know I've done Broad Street, you know, in Philadelphia twice, and I have a niece or a nephew and his wife that live at mile 8, and I do not generally run 10 miles, and so knowing that I'm going to see them at mile 8 it makes it so much easier, you know, because I know I'm going to get to see them and give them a quick hug while I'm running by, and then the last 2 miles aren't so bad at that point. So.
Nice, I like it. Well, you don't want to run by your friends like, I'm dying. Like, you know, like you see them around the corner, you're like, all right, upright, I'm doing good. Like, hi, this is the best run I've ever done. Like, around the corner. Well,
especially when it's a niece and nephew, and you're the old Aunt Janet. You have to let them know that you're handing their butts to them.
I love it. Take that. That's good. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. So I mentioned the second brain, and this isn't something we necessarily control at will, but we do have some control over how we feed ourselves. And so we do have an element of control over some mindset pieces in the brain. The reason I bring this up is more research is coming out about how our digestive tract, small intestine and large intestine specifically, actually communicates with our cerebral cortex. So our HPA axis, neurotransmitters, bacteria metabolites, and cytokines, they're produced at the level of the intestinal tract and actually affect our mood and affect several different systems in the brain. One interesting study showed that 75% of our serotonin is produced in the large intestine. Serotonin, serotonin is an extremely important neurotransmitter that you might know from SSRIs. That's a medication that somebody can take in order to help them with the depressive episode. And a serotonin reuptake inhibitor increases the amount of serotonin in the brain, and that seems to help some people come out of a depression state, a state of depression in their brain, which is powerful and important. But if you know that your large intestine produces 75% of your serotonin naturally, and you're feeding yourself things that don't sit well with your large intestine, then what we're currently in the process of understanding is how does that affect you? Could you literally eat yourself into depression? And it seems to be the case that that's possible. So it's important to know that your digestive tract communicates with your most primitive systems. So circadian rhythm, your status regulation, that's something that serotonin tells you whether you're at the top of the food chain or at the bottom of the food chain. It seems to be one of the things that it does. It also regulates hunger and fullness. So how our digestive tract communicates with our brain can tell us whether or not we're hungry or whether or not we're full. So cravings play into this. It's hard to have a positive mindset about your nutrition when you're wrestling with cravings all the time. And if it's possible that what you're eating changes how your gut communicates those cravings, that's powerful. That means that maybe you need a period of time where your nutrition is pretty strict and it doesn't feed your cravings, and therefore coming out of that you don't find that your second brain is making it more difficult to eat the healthy way that you'd like to. Your digestive tract also can regulate your immunity, relaxation, and it's possible that it can regulate other things. And so if you don't take anything else away from this particular slide, just know that food can impact your mood. What you consume can impact what's going on in your brain. And thus far, what we've talked about with regard to a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, we've talked about what's called a top-down process. It's something that you do up here that affects the rest of the body downstream. But it's important to understand that your brain has a difficult time overriding bottom-up processes that are things that are coming from the body all the way up into the brain. That's why pain is a very, very difficult obstacle with regard to mindset. I don't care how powerful of a brain you have. If you are in a significant enough amount of pain, you can't talk yourself out of it. There's a mindset that might deal with that pain better and more constructively, but you can't talk yourself out of being in physical pain. And if you want to play this game with yourself, what you can do is you can fill a bucket of ice, a bucket of water with ice, as much ice as possible, and take one arm and shove it all the way down in there as far as you can, and set a timer and see how long you can hold your arm in that bucket of ice. Now, there are very few people in the world who can hold their arm in that bucket of ice until that water goes to room temperature. And that's because, you've probably heard of like ice baths and stuff. People will sit in freezing cold water. It's different when your entire body's immersed. That changes things. But when one arm is stuck in a bucket of ice, it's going to get so numb and painful that eventually you're going to pull that sucker out of it. And research has actually shown that if you drop a few F-bombs while you're doing that, you'll actually hold it longer. So for some reason, cussing makes it easier to deal with. So you can take that away, right? So no, don't do that. Don't put that in your mindset. Dropping F-bombs in Better Daily, Faithful 40, because it's a rough day. Don't do that. But all that to say that the bottom up processes are almost, now I'm not going to say impossible, but they're very difficult for the top down process to override. And so one of the things that you can do for your mindset, if you're working to adopt a good growth mindset, is eat the stuff that is good for you and doesn't put you in a bad place. And that is really subjective because, you know, some of us can be in a bad place with too many Rice Krispie treats, and some of us can be in a bad place if, well, I gave you a bunch of sardines and told you had to eat them. You'd be like, my mindset is officially the worst mindset you could have asked of me with these stupid sardines. So it's different for people, but I want you to know that the condition of your gut, the condition of your microbiome, of your digestive tract, how it's responding to your food, it can affect your mood. And giving yourself the best bottom up chance of having a positive mindset is extremely important. So don't overlook that. Make sure you're getting enough. I mean, I've talked about this in other places, but make sure you're getting enough exposure to good fiber and phytonutrients. Make sure that you're getting enough exposure to healthy fats and good protein, and you're not overdoing it on the processed carbs and the sugary bits. And it's not just sugar that can be a problem here. Some people are sensitive or have inflammatory responses to certain foods that could be problematic for them as well. If you're like, is this food good or bad for me? Check your poop. That'll tell you. And that's all I'll say about that tonight. We can talk about poop another night. You're welcome. So, are there any questions about food affecting mood, or thoughts or comments out there? I don't want to hear a report on your poop this evening. If you don't mind keeping that bit to yourself, that would be great. But I did want to open this up for questions because that's its own can of worms. Good. Good. Thumbs up. All right. Sweet. So the next impactful mindset piece, I actually learned some things about this in the past couple weeks that I'm excited about. But if you follow the Defining Dad Bod podcast, I actually talked about the amygdalic response in executive function over the amygdala in a previous episode about anxiety. So if you missed that one, check it out. But meditation and journaling can be a powerful part of developing a good and positive mindset. And I'm curious, just show of hands, who actively journals? Does anybody, right? Looks like I got one of you, maybe two of you. Okay, got a couple who are like, I don't do that, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you are forever relegated to a terrible mindset. Meditation and journaling has been shown from a scientific perspective to be powerful practices in mindset. But I learned some stuff in the last 2 weeks that kind of, are some caveats there. So hear this out. First, meditation doesn't have to be a religious practice. There are many people who it is a religious. For me, I would replace that with prayer, and prayer is an important religious practice for me, especially coupled with fasting, and that's something I can talk about in a second. But the overall effect, at least from a biological perspective, is that your executive function, that's your frontal lobes, you push really hard right here, right in there. Your frontal lobes, your executive function, overrides your amygdala, and your amygdala is right in the center of your brain. It's about just one or two ping pong ball sizes, depending on how big your head is. And the amygdala's job is the emotional red flag. It's the thing that tells you whether or not this is something worth worrying about. So those of you who get like 30 emails a day, or maybe 500 emails a day, you scroll through and you already have in your amygdala a memory of the email addresses or subject lines or something like that you really care about. So when I was waiting for my tax return, if I got one of those little like IRS blah blah blah, I was like, oh no. And the IRS doesn't send email. Like they're not like, hey, here's an email. Like they do everything via snail mail. But the point is, even during that span of a couple months, I'm like, oh man, I need to open that. And it wasn't the IRS. It was, you know, some probably a small business organization I'm subscribed to, and they're talking about things that the IRS is doing. But my amygdala was like, hey, red flag, check that. Taxes are important. So your amygdala does that all day long. It's always doing its thing. Your executive function, your frontal lobes, their job is to inhibit the process of the amygdala. So if my frontal lobes were accurately functioning in that moment, and it's like IRS, instead of clicking on it, I would have said, IRS doesn't send emails. Delete. Moving on. Delete. 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 And so, and who knows? Maybe I had to change a poopy diaper just a second ago, and so my executive functioning was off. Or maybe I still haven't learned, and I need a few more tax seasons under my belt before I'm not like, oh, I need to read IRS subject lines. that's a silly example, but your amygdala does that all day long. If you are actively involved in meditation, mindfulness meditation specifically, that's not like, oh, I'm relaxing. It's mindfulness, actually exercising your frontal lobes to think about something specific, like a mindfulness meditation might be, think of a positive and powerful thing that happened to you today. Put yourself in that space, breathe and feel it over again. See the things that you were excited about or impressed by, or that you admired in the person that you were with. Feel the room, see the light, what color were the chairs, right? That is a mindfulness meditation. That is requiring your executive function to do some work. It's not relaxation, that's different. The deep breath, that deep breath can be helpful in relaxing the body, but it doesn't strengthen the frontal lobes in the long term. So meditation and prayer can be a powerful part of training your executive function over your amygdala, to override your amygdala. And I mentioned the difference between mindful meditation versus relaxation. That's what the research actually shows. If you ask people to go relax in a room rather than to go mindfully meditate and lead them through a guided meditation or a meditation that they're able to do on their own, the effects aren't as positive or powerful. You can see that in the bottom right there, where they pitted the control group against the experimental group. So what they did with these individuals was they asked them to relax. They asked one group of people to relax, and then they asked the other group, the mindful meditation group, to go through a mindful meditation, and then they put them through something stressful. And so they had to watch a particularly violent and brutal video of, I don't remember what it was about, but it wasn't great. It was a rough scene from an intense movie, right? So they had to watch this thing, and they tracked their salivary cortisol. That's how much of your stress hormone is actually in there. And excuse me, and sorry, not salivary cortisol, SIGA. SIGA is the opposite of salivary cortisol. It's what your body puts out when it's recovering from a stressful thing, and thereby making you more resilient to the next stressful thing. And you'll see that the mindful meditation group, the red group, they had way more of this after mental stress and after additional training, whereas relaxation actually didn't increase it after additional training. So that's important. The case in point there is that mindful meditation can teach the body to be resilient to stressful things, and you'll find it easier to have a growth mindset if you're resilient. If it's not like, I love to relax and scary things happen, I should go back to relaxing. It's like being resilient in your day to day rather than wishing that Cabo was here all the time. That's Cabo. Apparently, I need to do more meditation. So it also manages the immune response to do this mindful meditation or prayerful things. Now, what I learned in the past 2 weeks as I was researching for the anxiety podcast was that journaling is powerful, but gratitude journaling doesn't help everybody. If you're working to get yourself in a more positive and powerful mindset, it actually matters whether or not your baseline is anxious. So if you're an anxious person, journaling gratitude doesn't actually improve your anxiety. Journaling gratitude might give you a list of things that you can be thankful for, which is kind of cool. But those who are anxious, who do keep a gratitude journal, don't report any better moods 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months from now. What helps anxious people, which is kind of weird to think about, what helps anxious people are those who report high anxiety in the journaling practice, is to actually write down their anxious thoughts, all the things they think are going to go wrong, the anger, the fear, the frustration, the guilt, whatever it is that is kind of there, writing it down. Their mood actually goes down right after journaling, so it puts them in a worse mood than they reported before journaling. But within 24 hours, their mood's way better, and it actually progresses over a period of 3 months. And so, if you would categorize yourself as somebody who's relatively anxious, one of the ways that you could improve your mindset is get all of that out on paper rather than letting it spin in your mind. And I wouldn't recommend posting that on social media, because gratitude journals you can share with people and like they're happy about that. Like, oh, cool. Oh, we do it on Thanksgiving, right? Like that's a regular social media trope is, so what are you thankful for? What are you thankful for? Like, that's cool. Nobody's like, what makes you really anxious? And no, don't hold back. Tell me everything. And tell me every day for the next 30 days. Nobody wants to hear that. Not even your spouse wants to hear that if you're married. And not even your best friend if you're not married. Nobody wants to hear that. But journaling that, and some might even say praying about that, being able to say, God, this is what's up. These are the things that are kicking my butt right now, so that it's not in here. It's out. It's out of you. That's actually been shown to be helpful. It's hard in the moment. It won't make you feel better. Don't, if you're an anxious, generally high anxiety person, don't do it just before family dinner. Like, I need to get all these out of my head and then go to dinner. No, you're going to be worse off. You're going to be like, here's all the things I wrote down and why you people are driving me crazy. Make it a practice when you don't have to be around anybody, if possible. That would be good. And then last but not least is movement meditation. And research is looking at brain states that are achieved during movement. So yoga is a wonderful example of movement meditation. This is mindfulness meditation that involves your body. And I would argue, and I haven't seen this borne out in the research yet, but I would argue that those who have mastered a skill, they've spent a significant amount of time doing that particular thing with their body. Like some of us have spent many hours here running. Some of us have spent many hours here building things. Some of us have spent many hours here lifting weights. Those things that you can do with your body that focus your mind and create increased blood flow to the brain and a bunch of other things that are synergistically happening, that is actually powerful for your executive functioning as well. So meditation, whether it's movement-based, mindfulness-based, prayer-based, is powerful and important. And then from a journaling perspective, if you're less anxious and you're looking for your a boost or something to be helpful in your positive meditation practice, gratitude and wins is huge. But if you find yourself higher on that anxiety spectrum, and if you don't know what that means, find me after and we'll talk about it. But then journaling your anxious memories will actually do more for your positive mindset than gratitude. I'm not saying that you can't express gratitude and it'll help you. It's just that, it's kind of like the pain thing. You can't think straight when you're in pain. It's hard to be actually grateful for something when you're anxious. Anxious is the feeling of dread, the high tension feeling that everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket soon, and you're going to be the cause of it in some form or fashion, or something out there is going to cause you to go to hell in a handbasket, whatever that is. You can't, it's very hard. I'm not going to say you can't. It's very difficult for your executive functioning to override anxiety with gratitude. And the research seems to bear out that you got to get the anxious out first before gratitude is positive and beneficial and long lasting. So I've said a lot there. I want to pause and we'll finish with fasting in just a couple minutes. But do you have any questions, comments, thoughts, ads here? And I would love to hear about your personal experience with journaling, if you don't mind talking about it, or mindset, yoga, that sort of thing. Does anybody in the group meditate by moving? Like you go for a run to think, you do yoga to calm yourself. Like, does anybody in the group do that?
I have in the past.
Katie, you're about as close to a yogi as I know. Does that help, like, in your mindset? Does it help you to focus, or is it a workout in your book? She might be having some trouble with her phone. Excuse me. Somebody was about to say something and I interrupted them.
I was just going to say, if I have to have a difficult conversation, or if I'm thinking about it, if I write everything out ahead of time, I find it helps. So that's along the same lines that it helps me to focus on what's really important. And a lot of times I'll end up not even having to have it, because once I see it, or it's much more succinct.
So now I've journaled for a long, whoops, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I've journaled for a long time, and I've never just settled on one way of journaling. Sometimes I'll write a poem. Sometimes I'll put my prayer requests down. It's kind of neat to go back and look at how those were answered. Not just my prayer requests, but things that I've prayed over for others. But and then sometimes I'll do the anxious thought journaling. Sometimes I try to always include at least one bit of gratitude, or at least one recognition of the beauty or something positive and uplifting around me. I've always tried to include one item like that. But for when I was younger, I would actually write down prayer requests and full on prayers, because I had a habit of, when I asked the Lord for something, when I interceded on somebody's behalf for something, I often took that prayer back after putting it at the foot of his throne and worried over it. So I took to writing it down. And then in that fire pit we dug here in Blumpville, I would often burn those when I'd gotten them all written out, when I, had the moment that I had with the Lord over it. And, I would light it on fire, and I would visualize the ashes going up and that staying at the foot of the throne, so that when I left that prayerful state, I wasn't taking that stuff with me and worrying on it. And that was pretty powerful to me.
That's a cool ritual.
Yeah, I don't have to do it now. I mean, I did it so long then, it's kind of a mental thing now, and it's really cool.
Very cool. Well, because you got to see it. You've seen it happen. So, like, it's not hard for you to picture it.
Yeah.
It's cool. Well, Robin, I know you've said once upon a time that walking is a big meditative thing for you. Is that something that you knew before?
Yeah, it is. Walking, when I go walking, it's very relaxing. And come again?
Oh, go ahead, man. He's got a party going on at his house right now. I love it. I found that in weight training sessions with clients, when I can talk them through...
Alex, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That's okay, man. No worries. It sounds like you got a party where you're at. When I can talk them through movements and they're able to perform them well in our sessions, I've found that the the client will often report at the end of the session that they feel a lot better when they started, or than when they started. That the baggage that they walked in with doesn't feel so heavy. And I mean, I didn't do mindfulness meditation with them in the session necessarily, but thinking through movements and using the right muscle groups and breathing and whatnot. You know, there's a physical elevation to exercise, but there's also a mindful elevation when you have to make yourself focus on something and do it well. And that's something that's really hard if you've been exercising for a long time and you go do you do movements that you've done 1,000 times or 10,000 times. Sometimes it's hard to make yourself go back to it as a beginner and think through it well and make it a meditative practice, because you could do it on autopilot. So it's a hard thing to make your mind sit in your workout. It's hard to bring it back there. If that's you, I encourage you to give your workouts a go that way, because it's good for you. It'll help you with this whole mindset thing. The last thing I wanted to talk with you guys about tonight is fasting, and I've spoken about this in a few different veins with you guys, but specifically with regard to mindsets. Fasting is powerful because when our bodies are empty, our minds are not necessarily empty. When our bodies are empty, it actually allows us to enter a different state of consciousness. And there's research on this that suggests that a fast of just 18 hours for some people can change the relationship between alpha, theta, and delta waves in the brain. But fasting can be a powerful reset for mindfulness. And if you care to hear me talk a little bit about how to do it and my background and stuff, I posted in this slide season 3 episode 38 of Defining Dad Bod. I talk about fasting 101 specifically. I'm not talking about intermittent fasting. I'm not talking about 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, you don't eat, and then you eat for a 6-hour window. Like for some people, they find that beneficial and helpful. But mindset specifically is saying, I'm not going to eat today because X, Y, and Z. I'm fasting for a reason. And it seems to turn on different parts of our genetic makeup. So SIRT3 is actually a part of the cellular repair process. And it is it's eliminated when consuming antioxidants during a fasting period, meaning that the body repairs itself. It turns on a particular area of your genetic makeup that says, hey, there's nothing in here right now. We don't have to process energy. We don't have a lot of food coming in. Time to sweep out the factory. Time to clear out dead cells and make way for new. And I've also found that is a similar thing with regard to my mindset specifically, that when I have something big going on and I want to have a positive and good mindset about it, saying, you know what, I'm gonna fast. I'm gonna spend 24 hours, 48 hours not eating and meditating on this thing and journaling on this thing and praying through this thing. And I've found that synergy between body and mind is actually beneficial and helpful. And the research on fasting generally centers around things like insulin sensitivity and the effect on testosterone, the effect on weight loss and whatnot. They are just starting to look at what happens in the brain when human beings intentionally go without food. And I'm excited to bring that research to you guys as it gets hammered out. There's 2 studies in particular that I'm following right now that they're supposed to be done in July. So that'll be cool. But what they're looking at is, does fasting turn on certain portions of the brain that usually aren't that active, and or does fasting turn off certain portions of the brain that are particularly active? And one thing we do know is that fasting does relax the amygdala, that little ping pong size thing that red flags emotional items in your day. fasting actually calms that down. So your amygdala is not so wigged out when you're not feeding it, which is really interesting. But fasting can also change your insulin sensitivity, alter your microbiome. Remember, I talked about how that second gut, or excuse me, the second brain in your gut can be communicating with your mind. Sometimes pulling back from the food and letting your gut have a rest and restoration can be a helpful part of restoring that second brain. Obviously it's not very beneficial for muscle growth. You kind of need some good calories and protein to grow some muscle. So if you're in the middle of a muscle growth phase, it might not be good to try this. And then I always recommend caution to women of childbearing age for a number of reasons with regard to fasting for any reason, whether mindset related or not. Does anybody here fast for mindset reasons, or have you tried fasting? And what was your experience with your mindset?
I can focus a little bit better if I go into it with the right mindset. I find it can help my focus. There's other days where around lunchtime I'm like, you know what, this isn't the right day for it, and I'll just try it, because I'll just not be. I don't have my head where it needs to be. But other things, it can really help my focus if I go into it with the right mindset.
Yeah, well said. I've noticed that a similar effect, that there's certain stressors that if you're fasting, it's not good. It's too much. It's too many things. It's like, I'm not at my best. I'm not firing on all cylinders right now, and I kind of need to be. Whereas if there's not a significant amount of stressors, and this is my personal experience, if there's not a significant amount of stressors, it's like the noise that makes it difficult to focus kind of goes away, so I can pick the one thing. So it's been my experience, if I know that there's going to be a day that I don't have 12 things that need to happen, that's a great day to fast for me. And I personally have to make space for that. I have to say Saturday is the day, and I'm not going to do X, Y, Z. I have to let my wife in on the loop. I have to let her know, like, I'm gonna be moving just a little slower, but I'll be all right. Anybody else want to share their experience or their mindset or with fasting? Well, we talked about a lot tonight. We talked about growth mindsets versus fixed mindset. We talked about the teachers teaching kids and kids getting mildly abused for science. We talked about the role of mindset in mitigating stress on its effect on our body. And we also ran the gamut with our digestive tracts. We talked about fasting as well. We've hit quite a few things this evening. Is there anything on your mind that we have not talked about this evening that you want to make sure that we do?
Not that we've not talked about, but the mind-body connection is extremely powerful. When I had staph infection and I was on antibiotics for 2 months, that's the only time that I've really craved sweets in a long time. And I always joked that I was on antibiotic brain, but it was true. I mean, I was depleting all the gut flora. And so I spent this last year replacing that gut flora and doing what I can to support gut health. And also with the thyroid, having the lumps on it, I've been, doing things in my diet predominantly with the tea that would support that. And the cravings went away, probably within 3 weeks after being off the antibiotic. It got less and less and more tolerable. But and then when I first started menopause was another goofy time, because I was like craving rotisserie chicken and beer, and I wasn't even a drinker, and I was wanting beer.
Your body's like, give me estrogen.
Pretty much that's what it was. And it took me a while to figure that out, because I would go through like 3 rotisserie chickens in a week, man. It was no joke. It was, and I wanted the Walmart one, you know, that one that's all puffed up with hormones and antibiotics and stuff. Yeah, that was the one I wanted, not the nice nutritious Kroger one that they get from Purdue. I wanted the antibiotic hormone laden chicken. So it was crazy.
All right. That is crazy. And I can't say I've ever gone through that particularly.
But it does work both ways. I mean, your body, when I have a craving, I'm sitting there asking myself, what is going on with my body? Because if I all of a sudden crave something that's atypical for me, you know, then I'm either not giving my body the nutrients that it needs, you know, or something like that. And so in that case, it's almost impossible to override the mind, because it's, you know, the body's saying, I need this to function and you're not giving it to me. So we're going to get it however we can.
Right. Yeah. Downshift into that weird brain that you don't even know exists.
So like with the staph infection, with the antibiotic brain, I was like, you know, I'm going to be proactive. I know this craving's here. So I'm going to, you know, after the antibiotics are done, I'm going to go ahead and take the probiotics and, you know, eat good probiotic foods or prebiotic foods, and support my gut health that way, and make sure I get a lot of diversity or biodiversity as far as, you know, with my teas and the plant groups and stuff that I'm eating from. So, I mean, that was a big thing.
And I hate it for people too sometimes, because that's not common knowledge. And so, you know, you go to the doctor and you get an antibiotic, and then like 3 years later, you're like, I don't know when these cravings started, but I can't live without my sweet tea. You know, like, what? You're 45, put down the tea. Like, stop it. But that's trainer life. It was that actually started defining dad bod for me. I was driving home from work after Gabriel was born, and I kept stopping at the gas stations and getting s'mores Pop-Tarts. Have you guys ever had s'mores Pop-Tarts? Dude, there's no other Pop-Tarts worth eating in my book. Like, but man, s'mores Pop-Tarts. And I would stop at the gas station, get a s'mores Pop-Tart. That's not me. I'm a trainer. I don't do that. And I did that for like freaking months. I was like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with this guy? I'd eat a s'mores Pop-Tart on the way home and drink a bourbon. And like, I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't have multiple bourbons. It was just, that's the thing. I needed a Pop-Tart and a bourbon. And that's, I'm like looking at research on men and Pop-Tarts. I found a very huge study about how men's testosterone takes a huge dive when their first child is born, and how it, you know, comes back eventually, and how the serotonin dip can mess with your cravings and stuff. And I was like, I swear to God, I read like 12 parenting books before my son was born, and nobody said anything about that. Like, I feel like that should have been there. Hey, dads. So, you know, anyway, and, you know, I don't wrestle with bourbon and Pop-Tart cravings anymore, but the point is that is such a deep and powerful system. You're like, I was physically driving to the gas station from work on the way home to get a Pop-Tart. Like, who does that?
Well, that's where mindfulness really comes into play, because, you know, I mean, once you were aware of the why, I mean, you could employ a strategy to give your body what it needs in other ways, healthier ways to boost that testosterone, you know, as opposed to stopping and grabbing the Pop-Tart and getting your quick fix, you know?
Right. And if you know that that's the cause, right? Like, why do I want a Pop-Tart? It's not like, oh, it sounds really good and I've had a long day. Why do I want a Pop-Tart? Because I've got a 3-month-old at home. I'm sleep deprived and my testosterone's tanked. Do I really need it? No. Moving on. It's not doing my testosterone any favors. I'll eat Pop-Tarts with my kid when he grows up, and we'll earn it the old-fashioned way, but I don't need it right now. So, hey, that's very well said. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else on anybody else's mind before we close things down this evening? Let Katie get to bed after her one day that I beat her in steps.
You can't live that down, though. I mean, you can't do that because she's busted her butt and beat you all month long.
She's crushed me. I don't know if you were on when we said this, but if she didn't walk the rest of the faithful 40, I still wouldn't win. Like, her total steps is just. Please post that, by the way, on the last day, Katie. Please post your total steps so everybody can see how badly you whooped me.
She's crushed it. She has totally kicked butt and took names on that one.
True story. All right, I'll start giving Katie a hard time. You guys rock. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful to you and that your mindsets over the next week are going to be supercharged, as Bennett likes to say, supercharge. Thank you guys. Knuckle bumps all around. We will get some good rest, and I will see you in the group tomorrow. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.